guys, and welcome to another episode of Gamer Nation, where today we're talking about the importance of good writing in a video game and how it really affects a mediocre game and to turn it into an amazing game. Dialogue and talking, something I actually enjoy doing a lot.
Yes.
Yeah,
you never shut up.
You never shut up, and nothing you say ever makes any sense.
Some of it does. Speaking of making sense, we've got Jess V here again, because you all love her so much.
Yeah, she makes so much sense.
I do make sense, yes. Thank you.
Dallas.
Plus, it just makes sense
really
to have
creepy.
Jess V
Thank
here.
you guys.
Normally Joshua's the creepy one, ladies and
I'm
gentlemen.
sorry.
Don't take that from me. So, writing in games, Lasercorn, what do you think is the importance of writing in a good game?
It's super important. Like, good writing can make a game, like you said, it could take a mediocre game and make it great, and it can elevate a great game to like that ultimate gaming experience that you want, like the shirt Jess V is wearing right here, Portal 2.
My modified shirt?
Yeah.
Check out the back.
Yeah. That's
Very
awesome.
cute.
Yeah.
A classic example of when writing and gameplay come together. Yes, I'm going to let you talk about that in a minute. When writing and gameplay come together to form pretty much the perfect game. Because you can have a game that has great gameplay, but without like a meaningful story and good dialogue. Like Portal 2 has some of the best dialogue ever, and I always refer to the segment where GLaDOS calls your parents and in a operator voice says, "The parents you are trying to reach do not love you anymore. Please hang up." And I was laughing hysterically. And those like memorable standout moments is what makes a great game great.
Jess V, are there any games that you've played in obscurely or recently that have just great dialogue?
Well, I mean, I know
There's
we
that
talked
one
about...
game for the Sega Dreamcast.
Right, yeah.
The
I
Sega
know,
CG, Jaguar
Yes.
3DO.
Stop it. Okay, all right. No, I was going to talk about real quick just The Walking Dead. It was my game of the year. That was completely story-driven with pretty minimal to, I don't want to call it mediocre gameplay, but it wasn't the most exciting kind of game.
It was a point-and-click game.
But yeah, it was a point-and-click, but it was such an emotional storyline that was happening there that you really felt enwrapped in what was going on and these decisions that you had to make.
For me, when it comes to dialogue in a game, I will be turned off so quickly, I will just stop playing the game altogether. I've talked about this many of times of how I used to be a huge Final Fantasy fan, and the dialogue in 13 I thought was just so bad that I maybe played for 3 hours and I couldn't take it anymore. They kept using the word hero. Yeah, and I understand that it's a JRPG and it's their style, but again, if the dialogue doesn't match or doesn't work for the gamer,
if
I wish
it
we
was
could
just
get
some
a
lazy translator or some guy who got his job who's like, yeah, I could totally translate like Japanese to English, and they're just like, oh, I totally can't. I'll just make something up, and then like it got through. He's like, this is the worst dialogue ever. And like really, if you understand Japanese, it's like a really good game.
I wish
we don't know. It could be that.
I think I'm gonna do a video on my channel where I just play like the first 3 hours of Final Fantasy 13 and just cut together all the scenes where they say hero.
Oh, God.
Oh,
that'd
please
be-
do.
That'd be good.
Please do.
Don't take my idea. Don't take my idea.
That just makes me want to shoot
Yeah,
myself in
there.
the head.
This is a
Just
copywritten idea.
It might be out there. You never know.
It could be.
It's true.
Yeah,
it's true.
Story, bad dialogue can ruin a game, as Joven has just pointed out.
All right, so I know that you've been pointing
he wants to
at
talk
games
about
some
last
time.
night.
Yeah.
Where we would, what are some games that you love with great dialogue that just really sell the experience for you?
Well, I think Lasercorn mentioned a few of them. Portal 2, obviously amazing, but Last of Us just blew me away. Especially with what Jesse was talking about with like voice acting. The voice acting in The Last of Us for literally every character in the game was just flawless. It felt like a Hollywood blockbuster movie type quality to the storytelling, and it was just excellent all the way through. And it was one of those things where I think if the story hadn't been so amazing and the storytelling hadn't been so good, you'd been like, yeah, it's a pretty good game, but whatever. Because I mean, it's sort of a typical like third-person shooter survival horror style to it, but the story was just so damn good in this game. I can't say enough about it.
I can't wait to play it.
You have to
the
play
look on
through.
your face you get when you talk
So
about it.
you've been hogging the Office copy for too long?
And
Your review is over?
let me just say that like the characters never become cliche. Even when you feel this cliche moment coming on, like, okay, this is a typical moment in one of these types of stories, they either turn it on its head, or the characters are just like so dynamic and complex, and like their past affects their decisions so much that it never becomes cliche, even in those moments where you're like afraid that it might. So can't say enough good things about it. You got to play it.
Well, guys, that's all of our opinions on dialogue and writing in a video game and what it sells for the experience. But now we're going to go to you guys in a segment we call Tweets from the Fans. All right, for today's Tweets from the Fans, the question I asked was, when it comes to story, what are some of your favorite games with the best story? And from Foxy's Right Ear, he says, The Legend of Zelda series overall has had fantastic storytelling throughout all of the games, especially Wind Waker. Now, I'm not a huge Zelda fan. I've never been a huge Zelda fan, actually. I didn't like the gameplay of it. I didn't think it was a real RPG. I know, throw stones at me if you will. But have you guys played through any of the...
I didn't play...
Never been a big Zelda guy.
Wind Waker. I did play Ocarina of Time and A Link to the Past, and obviously the first Legend of Zelda. Yeah, the storytelling's good. My only complaint is probably that it's all the same story.
All right. Now to our second tweet. We've got this is Dylan Moss5 says, well, the games that I think have the best writing and story would be the Metal Gear Solid game series. I'm sure you guys have heard us shout the name off screen a few times, but Cliff, one of our editors here, a good friend of ours, he absolutely loves the Metal Gear Solid games and says the story is fantastic. Personally, again, it's a one that just gets a little too confusing. There's like clones and there's different people
and brothers
But even I've gone onto Twitter to kind of like talk against how great the game is, and people are like, what? Are you kidding? Like, this is a fantastic story. So maybe it's not for me.
The story can get convoluted at times. A lot of times they start with a really interesting premise and then take it through sort of a bunch of weird
Japanese things.
Twists and turns. But I think the one thing you can say about the Metal Gear games is the characters are memorable. You remember Liquid Snake, you remember Ocelot, even in the new game, you remember Sundowner if anyone played Metal Gear Rising Revengeance. People remember Raiden because he's a badass ninja with a sword. The characters, they're like, you know what? Let's just not make the characters realistic. Let's just emblazon them in people's memory.
And then from Joshua O'Clock. No.
Is
Joshua.
Is that an alt account?
Joshua.
Yeah.
Al. Hey, Jessica, how would you pronounce that name?
Joshua Alcock. Yes.
I like that you made her say that.
I said Joshua. I did say Joshua.
Yeah, you did. And he says BioShock and Mass Effect trilogy, hands down. I didn't play.
Maybe not the second BioShock.
I didn't play. Yeah, people say the second one's kind of.
It could have been DLC in my
BioShock.
opinion.
I mean, I didn't play BioShock 2, but I've heard people say that the single player is like pretty good. I thought the multiplayer was like.
What about dialogue and story? Like,
in the second one,
would you kindly?
How
great of a twist the first one was that?
I don't think anyone's arguing.
Yeah, the first one was ridiculous.
I'm just saying the second BioShock.
By the way, Jobin, another silent protagonist. That's awesome.
There you go. Yes, silent heroes are pretty. We should do like a Wyra singular top 5 on that. But Mass Effect. I didn't mention this in my first rant.
Yeah, and I would say honestly, that game, like, the story, as far as I've seen when I played it, is like one of the only reasons you'd play, because the gameplay is like pretty okay. It's like whatever. It's a typical. I mean, not even typical. It's like very clunky shooting mechanics.
The first one definitely, if you try to go back, the second one has its moments. I thought the gameplay in 3 was actually really good and up to date.
It's still like the cover was like too sticky. I don't know. I didn't really like the gameplay that much, but the story's cool.
Oh yeah. In Mass Effect 3, when you have Mordin and you're either going to stop the genophage or continue it, depending on the storyline you're making, and there's the potential of him dying. It made me feel so many emotions because the dialogue was so good.
Would you say that you had so many feels?
I had so many feels that I started to leak from my eyes, and I'm not used to that. No, don't shoot me in the face. It's how I make money.
I'll make you leak from your eyes. Damn it.
Anyways, but yes, I agree.
That would have been a good one-liner right before you shot him in the face.
Yeah, and the fact that what I love about the Mass Effect series is that almost everyone I speak to has a different story about how their story ended up, and I just think that is so phenomenal. Yeah, no, it's
true. Yeah, I mean, adventure books for
it's pretty. No, I mean, it's pretty cool. You could either have a red ending, a blue ending, or a green ending. It's sweet.
Anyways, on that note, guys, thank you so much for sending your tweets here to Gamer Nation. Lasercorn, give us your epic speech.
Yep, it's not epic. It's just another segment where we pit one gamer against another in a little thing we call PvP. All right, guys, this week's PvP topic: which is more important, story or gameplay? Defending gameplay, we have Sohinki. Defending story, the Jovenshire. You know how this works? You should have 30 seconds to issue your opening statements, followed by a 15-second rebuttal. And since Joven opened up during last week's debate, we're going to go over here to Sohinki to open up. Ready? And go.
I think that it's incredibly, incredibly hard to argue that gameplay is less important than story. Gameplay has always been more important than story. One of your favorite games, Joshua, is Tetris, which is literally all gameplay, and there's no story. So I don't even know how you're arguing for story. And I think that we can see that a good story can make a game with pretty okay gameplay good, but we've never seen a scenario where a game with a great story and bad gameplay has been remembered. So that's my argument.
And time. Sohinki claiming that Tetris had no story, obviously missing the subtle romance between the line piece and the Z piece. You really had to read between the lines, as it were, but it was there.
Aw, funny.
A subtle story.
Should take that to your stand-up act.
Yeah. Jovenshire, you have 30 seconds for your opening statement. Go.
I think what's important is to actually really look back to what has brought us to this point. Is we are gamers now because of the games that we grew up with, where gameplay was on the Super Nintendo, Genesis, NES, Atari was nothing fantastic and normally always the same thing. But it was these stories in said games that really just made us love each game. For example, for me, it's Final Fantasy III. Really, it was just another dungeon crawler role-playing game, but the story was so amazing that to this day, I still think it's one of the greatest video games I've ever played because the story was so strong.
And wow, you got an extra second in there, so you're lucky.
Lasercorn wasn't paying attention to the clock. I get a bonus point.
Jovenshire using his time to, for some reason, praise Final Fantasy III, which, while a great game, I don't know. I guess it's all right. All right, 15-second rebuttal. Go.
I'll just refer back to my previous statement. I don't think there's ever been a situation where you've had a game that's had an amazing story but terrible gameplay and people have actually really loved it. I think gameplay is always most important. I think games are enhanced by an amazing story, as is the case with The Last of Us, but I don't think that the story stands on its own.
All right. So Hinky pretty much saying what he said before.
Yeah. That's because it was such a good point.
Yeah, such a good point. He made it twice.
Yeah.
All right, Jovenshire, go ahead.
I'm actually going to go, I will come up with an example. Let's say Resident Evil. If you try to go back and play those first games with the fixed camera and the kind of the wonky, kind of like, wait, no, I'm moving this way, no, I'm moving this way, oh, there's a zombie coming in this way. Gameplay was not great, but because of the story...
And stop.
At the time it was good.
Because of story.
At the time it was good.
Jovenshire instantly losing by saying something bad about the original Resident Evil. Now, just kidding, kids, although I am partial to that game. It's really up to you to decide who won or lost. Go on, leave it in the comments, Sohinki or Jovenshire, and let us know what topics you'd like to see discussed here on Gamer Nation.
And as always, we got Jess V here, so go follow her on Twitter because she's a magical, wonderful unicorn that
Thank you guys.
farts jelly beans.
What?
Yeah.
You heard him.
That should be your Twitter bio.
Yeah. I fart jelly beans.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's always doing stuff in the video game community. So
You would be a huge hit at
all
parties.
these guys.
I would.
Go. We'll see you next week.
Later.
See ya.